Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience. We're just a few minutes late getting started this evening, and welcome to a first and a last. So this is the first regular council meeting of this term of council, and it is the last regular council meeting of the year 2023. So I'm going to ask everybody, or 2022, sorry, I'm really ahead of myself now. I'm going to ask those who are with us tonight to have patience with us. We're still learning to get to know each other. It may look easy being at this desk, but I can guarantee you it isn't easy right off the bat. We're going to encourage all members of council tonight to put up your hand if you have a question, or if you feel we've gone past something, or if you think I'm going too fast, please put up your hand and tell me to slow down. I'm happy to do that. We'll work our way through this and we will move forward together. So I'm going to start tonight by letting you know that if you've got your devices near you or with you, to please make sure they're on silent for those members of council, but anyone who's in the audience watching as well. And to let you know that we will be audio and video recording everything this evening, and we're keeping that in accordance with the town's retention bylaw. So we'll start, as we do each meeting, with a land acknowledgement statement. I'll be reading it this evening, and with council's concurrence, we'll move that duty across the table so everyone will have the opportunity to have a chance to read the land acknowledgement from time to time. The town of Innisfil acknowledges that we are situated on treaty lands that are steeped in rich Indigenous history. We acknowledge that this land is the traditional territories of the First Peoples of Turtle Island. It is shared between the Anishinaabe peoples of Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, and Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, and we thank them for their generations of stewardship. This meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people, and as settlers, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. The town acknowledges the forced sacrifices that are the foundation of Canadian society today. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So the first item on the agenda is always open forum. It's the opportunity if there's any members of the public who wish to give us a 2-minute, what's the word I'm looking for, advocacy on anything that's on the agenda this evening that they'd like us to do, and we've had no one sign up this evening. So then we will move to item 3, which is the approval of the agenda, and I'd ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Zanella and Councillor Drodge. Are there any agenda amendments required, Madam Clerk?
Not this evening, thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of approval of the agenda as printed? Those opposed? That's carried. Then we ask for disclosures of interest. So if there's any pecuniary interest, conflict of interest that you noticed while reading your packages, you could let us know about that now. And I'm not seeing any hands, but even when we're halfway through the agenda, if we're talking about something and it strays off into something you feel might be a conflict for you, please feel free to put up your hand then and declare that conflict, and the clerks will help you fill out any necessary paperwork on that conflict. So seeing none, item number 5 is presentations and petitions. We have none of those this evening. However, item 6, we do have delegations by members of the public, invited guests, or members of staff, and this evening we will be having a presentation on the 2023-2024 budget. So no rest for you. First meeting, and here we go with a 2-year budget. So I'll ask CAO Gershow to start us off, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dolan, and good evening, members of council. Welcome to the new term. You are indeed. We're getting right down to business with you with a very significant set of decision points involved in the budget. So we'd like to just take a few minutes tonight to set the stage. I'd like to offer a few introductory remarks before turning things over to our CFO and Director of Corporate Services and Innovation, Mike Melanishin, and Audrey Webb, the town's treasurer. I'd like to start by repeating some of the advice that I gave to council at this time last year, because I think the advice actually still holds as it relates to making the budget. And I think it starts with a reminder that approving a budget is one of council's most important decisions that you'll make each year, because I think it's a statement to the community about your priorities as council. And it also really fundamentally determines both the financial and human resources that are available to pursue the priorities that you have put in place as council. It obviously directly affects the residents and businesses here in Innisfil because it is ultimately their money that we are spending, and we need to respect that. We have a duty to respect our taxpayers who work hard for their money and expect the town to treat their money wisely, to spend it wisely. So I believe we do have a duty to invest in this community, to provide the services and the infrastructure that this community needs, but especially in the face of growth. That is a particular challenge, and we all know that this is a rapidly growing community. We need this budget to both address our day-to-day operating needs, but also our longer-term infrastructure needs, both building new assets to accommodate our growth, but to maintain the assets that we have as well. And I encourage everyone to keep in mind the fact that we will be raising money not just for town purposes, but also money that we pass along to other organizations such as the South Simcoe Police, such as the County of Simcoe, through the levy that we place on our residents. So the budgeting task has indeed been made more difficult this year, I think by the fact that we are still emerging from pandemic circumstances, which had a significant impact on the town's finances, as well as some unique inflationary pressures that I think a number of us have heard about. And so I would say that approving any budget in any organization is inherently a balancing act and usually involves some degree of compromise, and that's why it's a difficult decision. So if I had to summarize our approach to the budget this year in one word, that one word would be balance. And that's balancing the needs to invest in our organization and in our community with the need to maintain affordability and to keep taxes as low as they reasonably can be kept. So please keep in mind that what you're going to hear tonight is simply the starting point for a conversation. We are going to spend the next couple of months working and talking with you about the budget. We will have further opportunities for deliberation in January before we seek your approval. So tonight is really about starting the conversation. I hope that you will ask many questions and provide us with your input and direction. Because as council, you are the decision makers. This is ultimately your budget for this community, and we are certainly looking forward to working with you on it. So with that, I'll turn things over to Mike and Audrey.
Thank you, Oliver. Welcome to this evening. I would have to say that, corporately, collectively, we are taking a sigh of relief today. The I's have been dotted, the T's have been crossed. This is a culmination of work. It's not a finance initiative. This budget is a corporate initiative that all hands on deck has helped prepare. Audrey and I just have the pleasure of representing the budget and finance and bringing it forth to you. So yes, it is, as Oliver said, it's the start of the talks, and these talks will continue over for the next few months. The budget process for us has started probably in March timeframe, early spring, so it is a full year endeavor. We have a unique budget because, we've mentioned this in the past, but we have a multi-year budget. So you're not just looking at a budget for this 1 year, you're looking at it for the next 2 years. So we are calling on your prognostication skills and forward-looking to try and predict where the future goes and see if we can come up with alignment over the next 2 years where we predict the operating budget to land. So as I said, this is a multi-year budget. We are also unique in that we have something called the service-based budget, where we don't take the traditional approach to budgeting. We have not the departmental approach, but we want to look at the holistic view of the services we're providing to show value for money in everything that we're and how we're spending taxpayers' dollars. So you're going to see that transition, and once you have a chance to go through the budget book, we are very pleased to say that the budget book has been shaved in almost half from prior years. I think we're sitting at about 207 pages as opposed to last iteration of about 484. So we have tried to shorten a little bit, but we haven't put everything in there because it just becomes a monumental document. So just to start off, like I say, we do a 2-year operating budget. We do a 2-year, what you're going to see as well in the presentation is a 2-year capital budget with an 8-year forecast. So we're trying to look at the broader picture, not just the very short-term focus, because capital projects are longer term in nature as well. I think I just want to draw your attention to the slogan there, your budget, your Innisfil, investing in today, preparing for tomorrow. I think that's a really poignant statement, and it ties back to Oliver's concept that this budget all is about balance, true balance, balancing the need to invest, but being affordable for our taxpayers. I'm going to take it a step further, and it's also a balance between short-term needs and long-term and long-term requirements. So it's this balance that has to happen, and that's what we really strive for as a staff, to be able to put that across as a balanced budget across not just the next 2 years, but across the next 10 years and prepare us well into the future. Next slide. There are many, many inputs into the budget. It is a complex process. This is what staff works towards to make sure we're not missing any of the key components that be built up into the budget. Our first is our strategic plan. It was created a few years ago called Innovate Innisfil 2030. So it was a 10-year time horizon out to 2030. There are some key principles, guiding principles in there to help us grow sustainably, manage our growth, make sure our residents are connected properly, and to be able to provide a sustainable future for our residents, not just financially but also environmentally as well. Another big input that's had a big influence in the last couple of years is something called the Community Needs Assessment, and this was an analysis where we reached out to the community to see what their real desires and needs were, especially in the light of COVID. We did that assessment during the COVID pandemic to see how we needed to pivot as a community, as staff, to be able to provide those needs that residents wanted. We have something called master plans, and master plans are these guiding tools, these guiding force that help, where our priorities lie when it comes to infrastructure and libraries and fire departments, and where are we going to settle our settlement balance for our population growth, and all these master plans really have a huge impact financially, especially when it comes to infrastructure on the budget. The other key component you're going to hear repeatedly is asset management. We have millions and millions of dollars of infrastructure assets that we're a growing community, we have to keep adding more infrastructure, but we have this pile of inventory that we need to maintain and keep going and to provide proper service levels for our residents. So we need to maintain those, replace them when they need it, and keep them operating. As you know, you hear a lot in the news, there are significant economic trends that impact the budget. Inflation, as Oliver alluded to, rising interest rates impact our debt loads. There's so many economic trends and just general uncertainty in the world, wars in Ukraine, and that impacts gas prices and our fuel prices for our operations team, and it ripples throughout the organization, so we're trying to be cognizant of those issues. We have this wonderful thing called the growth forecast, how much population is going to land in Innisfil, and that impacts our service levels, impacts our infrastructure, it impacts many impacts on the budget. And key also is the levels of service. As a council, this is a decision point for you of what kind of services do you want to maintain and provide the residents of Innisfil. Do you want to keep the existing services viable, or are there new ones? You've heard when you were canvassing out for the election. Did you hear new things and this is the opportunity to have those discussions. So just wanted to show you very high level some of the things that staff we try and grapple with and bring all together to come in with a comprehensive impact on our budget. The budget process looks very simple. 4 steps, that's all it is to create a budget. I have to say it's highly simplified. The budget process, as I said, starts probably in early spring. The departments, typically we have direction from council saying, oh, we want to achieve, a certain level of budget, and staff works towards that. This year with the election, we didn't take that step. Departments went off, created what they thought their future, the next 2 years was going to look like for them. The departments create these comprehensive budgets. Admittedly, this budget cycle, every rock was turned to see where we can have savings, looking deep dive into a line-by-line iteration of the budget. So departments come together, then there's a comprehensive review. People have their asks, how much do they want to hire more staff? Do they want to have a different program put in place? New assets that they need to keep their service levels sufficient, and then that's all brought together and brought to the steering group, and the steering group reviews that. The steering group is the executive team, and we review all those department submissions, and we prioritize and try to say, what do we need? What can we achieve? What's a reasonable tax rate going forward? And then what it culminates into what you're getting tonight is staff's recommendation of a proposed budget that we think is justifiable and a solid budget, and really seeking your input on to see if it's something you're comfortable with or you have different ideas that you would like to share. So there are two pieces of that. There's the capital side, there's the capital budget and the operating budget. As I said, the capital budget is about the asset management and managing our infrastructure, and the operating side will be just service delivery and the impact on the tax rates. For this budget iteration, we always want public input. We want to know what the public's looking for, what they want to see from, what services they want from council, from town. And we did a survey, really interesting. We had 139 responses. Doesn't sound huge, but that is a really, actually very surprisingly high turnout and response rate. Common themes came out of that. Public transit is key, keeping the beaches and parks clean, recreation services, and making sure that we have more employment in town, making sure more businesses settle in Innisfil. So they topped the list, and you can see it there on that bar graph. Road maintenance, parks, fire services, and recreation and culture top the sort of the top four of that. And staff goes back, we take that back and make sure within our budget, we're meeting those key things of what the residents want. And I think you'll see that ripple through the budget as you go through the budget book. The budget book is great reading, as says the accountant, so you will really enjoy it, and you will see all these concepts ripple through this binder once you receive it. So, what we've all been waiting for. What is staff's proposed recommendation for council? This year, we are proposing for 2023, remember this is a 2-year budget. For 2023, we are recommending a 4.93% increase, and in 2024, we are recommending a 4.16% increase. So you have an understanding of what's included in that. We are resuming, this is sort of a blended rate. So this rate includes, our contributions, to provide services for the town, our contributions to the county, our contributions to the Saskatchewan Police, our contributions to Provincial Education, Ministry of Education, and as well as we have an extra 1% capital levy, which is mandatory, or which we think is really necessary for asset management replacement and renewal to keep us sustainable into the future. So what's included in there? So we've resumed the 1% capital levy. In 2020, we stopped the increase on the capital levy as a concession to help people through the pandemic. In 2021, in 2022, we increased that to 0.5%. But we are recommending, as part of this year's budget, that be restored back to its original mandate of a 1% capital levy. We think it's absolutely imperative, to ensure that our assets are maintained in a cost-effective manner. There are some new services. We have a few enhanced services. It's particularly such as related to engineering for the delivery of infrastructure projects, as well as some additional building inspectors. Because we are a high-growth community, there's a lot more residences to be inspected, so we are recommending bringing more staff on. There's also an investment in existing staff. And this is really, really key in this market, in this environment. There's a lot of migration of employees in and out of businesses and organizations these days. So investment in our existing staff is really key tool for retention and attraction of employees. People we want residents or staff to employees to come to Innisfil to work, stay, live, and play. As I said earlier, we are meeting with with this budget increase, allocates money towards our, we call service partners, so library, police, the county, there's also the education. So the police net levy, you're going to see this, there's budget documents on police budget. The police budget had a net levy increase of about 5.6%, just for their budget alone, increased about 5.6% for 2023 and 5.5% for 2024. And that is a shared cost in general with Bradford. So you'll see this a little bit later on in the presentation, that is built into our blended tax rate of the 4.93 and 4.16 for 23-24 respectively. The library had a small increase of about $150,000, which amounted to roughly just over a 4% increase in the library. Once again, they were facing a lot of inflationary pressures too, from rising costs of books, e-books, and things like that. So as well, this budget goes for maintaining our existing services. So we had a lot of services that we were able to provide. We had savings in other areas. We repurposed those services to create those savings for new services. And that's why as we move forward into the years, we want to keep those services alive and well. And this budget increase helps maintain the existing service levels. Thanks, Kim. So just the next slide. This is just sort of a summary of the average household. So what we do to try and make it a little bit more understandable, we have houses in Innisfil that range in value, from less than $500,000 to multi-million-dollar homes. We take the average price, the average household, the average assessment of the household, and what that 4.93% and 4.16% impact will be on their homes. So typically in an average household, that amounts to about $225 for 2023 and just under $200 increase for 2024. It was a very challenging budget to achieve. We, as I said earlier, we turned over every rock. We didn't leave anything not looked at, not analyzed, not reviewed. It was a deep dive into the budget, and I think it's one of the most extensive dives that we had to, because we were up against a lot of outside pressures, as I mentioned earlier, on the impacts of the budget. We are coming in at 4.93%. CPI right now is just under 7%. And the construction price index is well over 16%. Those are staggering numbers, and you're going to see those numbers, especially the construction price index, as you see our go through our capital budgets, the impact that we've had, that inflation has had on our capital budgets. This is what we're facing, this is what we're dealing with, and this is why we left no rock unturned to make sure we found every savings we possibly could. I sort of touched on the factors, and Oliver as well in his opening statements talked about the factors impacting, and these were significant. The lingering COVID impacts, we had budgeted, we still have revenue losses at certain of our certain rec centers, our ice rinks. They haven't restored. They haven't come fully back to pre-pandemic levels. The other interesting point here I really want to point out is in 2021 and 2022, we provided a 0% and originally a 1% budget for our residents to help them through the COVID pandemic and the council-approved budgets. The 2022 budget was revised from a 1% increase to a 2.49%. But those are, we've had to make up ground to reestablish those levels. We knew that was going to happen. I think the returning councils were saying there was a lot of debate about that at the time, and now we're sort of seeing that catch up. We had to catch up and make up for those years of when we had very, very little tax increases coming in. We have collective agreement increases going on that are built into the contracts, are going to be built into future contracts. We are a high growth community as well. We are seeing significant growth, and we will get into that a little bit more. There's the county process called the Municipal Comprehensive Review that has significant allocation of population and projections for the next 30 years of up to 86,000 people. It's more than doubling ourselves, and not a very long time. I think Director Deloitte always says it took us 300 years to get to 40,000. It's going to take us 30 years to get to 80,000 or so. So it's a very tight time frame that we always need to manage growth very, very carefully, and we have to be very cognizant of that. And our big brother, I call it the provincial policy, the province that really dictates what we do as municipalities, what we're allowed to do. They are consistently, we're consistently on our toes watching what they do and the changes they make from policy regulations and those kind of things. And as you know, their most recent endeavor, Bill 23, which we don't know the full impact yet, we're still trying to assess. So we're trying to keep some money in it for a rainy day to make sure we can manage that Bill 23 and the impacts, because it's going to impact our budgets and our development charges. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of economic uncertainty between inflation, interest rates, global wars, fuel price rising. So we're trying to, all those factors we have built into this budget. Just a little bit, next slide, there's a little bit of a historical context here on this, on the trend of where we have, the town-only tax portion as well as the blended tax. When I say blended, I mean all those town partners built in, the town, the police, the county, the education, all built into one, and the capital levy. So the blended increase, so if you look at it, the trend line is indicative, actually this trend line is very indicative of what most municipalities have felt as well. This is not just an Innisfil statement. This is what we're hearing. We are much further ahead in the game from an Innisfil perspective. On our budget, most municipalities are a little bit further behind than we are, but this is what we're hearing on the ground. We're trying to, you'll notice the blip in 22, 23, 24, because we are trying, as I said, trying to reset ourselves from those lean years of 21 and 22, where we had low budget increases. And as well, the blended rate does blip up on this one at the end of the chart, because there are increases in our town partners, like the South Simcoe Police at 5.6% overall in 23 and 5.5% in 2024. So that's just a very high-level analysis. I just wanted to share with you, sort of where we've landed. There will be a lot more detail coming, and Audrey's going to go on a little bit deeper dive into the numbers and how we structured our budget.
Oh, there it goes. Sorry about that. So this next slide, just going to explain in some more detail what a service-based budget is. As Mike indicated earlier on in the presentation, the town does deliver a service-based budget. The first service-based budget that the town delivered, I believe, was 2019-2020. Prior to that, we, as many municipalities historically, delivered what we call a traditional budget to council. And so that budget that would come to council would be grouped by departments. So when you would get your budget book, you would open it up and you would see the operations department. And then within the operations department, you would see the resources that are allocated for staffing, materials and supplies, utilities, etc. What you didn't really get a good sense of is what it costs to deliver specific services. So this was the cost for the operations department, but it didn't really tell you, how much it costs for the roadway network. So the transition to service-based budget is just about that. It's another way to look at budgeting. It's a different lens to look at your budget. Nothing changes in the budget. It's just how we look at the budget. And so now the budget is structured by services. So we take that operations department and we split that up into the services that it delivers. So in the case of the operations department at the town of Innisfil, you'll see in your budget binders, there's transportation network, parks and open spaces, facilities management. So now you see the breakdown of costs by the different service areas. And you'll see a further breakdown, by the staff resources, materials, etc. But really, the benefit of doing that is it really shifts the conversation to about the services and the costs related to the services. It really makes that connection between the cost of services. And so then hopefully, council and the community can make more informed decisions in terms of, where they spend their money, because we have that better correlation between the cost to delivering the services and the levels of services that we're delivering. So we can have conversations about, levels of service and whether you want to increase the level of service, increase the cost, or decrease levels of service. And so that's the benefit of service-based budgeting. And you'll see in other municipalities, they are transitioning to that as well. Next slide, please. This particular graphic is also contained in the budget book, and it just displays the various different services that you will find in the budget book. So the services are all listed there, and they are grouped under what we call service categories. And so the first category is safety, and so within that category, we've got bylaw, fire, and police. We've got growth, so those particular service areas are delivering primarily growth-related services to the community. We've got a group related to connection, the library's in there, Innisfil Transit. Sustainability, this is where, in large part where we're managing our assets, we're managing what we own. We have the transportation network, parks and open spaces, facilities. And then the last category is management. The first service in there, which is corporate finance, that includes what I would refer to as town-wide revenues and expenditures. So it's not attributable to any particular department specifically. And so for example, in there is where we have our budgeted property taxation, where we've got our investment income. So that's what's within corporate finance. The other services listed under the management column are all the services that support the other services in delivering their services, so internal support services. And so we've got corporate legal, we've got corporate management, which includes the Office of the CAO and the business performance team, financial management team, fleet, IT, and people and talent. And so in the budget books for those services, each service will have a business plan. And I'll go over the business plans a bit later, but for each service, there will be a business plan within the budget book. Next slide, please. And so these next set of slides, I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of, by service category, the budget pressures, some important and key highlights of budget pressures, of reductions that we made. Mike talked to the process that we went through. It was a very extensive process where we took a deep dive into the budgets of all the departments. And so there are some reductions and cuts that we did make, as well as service enhancements. So this first category, service category safety, we've got bylaw, fire, and police. So police, they are governed by the Police Services Act. And so there is a police board, and so that police board will be bringing forward to you, council, their budget. We're scheduling that for those council budget deliberation days, most likely on January 25th. So they'll present the budget to you for your approval. By virtue of the Police Services Act, you have the ability to approve or not approve that budget. So you can send it back to them. What you can't do is you can't get into line by line item details and request specific changes to their budget. I think you can just in more general terms ask them to reduce it or increase it potentially. So that'll be happening on January 25th. As well included in here then is bylaw enforcement and fire protection. In terms of budget pressures, we deliver services, and we're primarily a service delivery corporation. And so with that, we really depend on our staffing to do that. Service delivery is heavily dependent on our staffing resources. And so it's certainly been a challenge in putting this budget together, in being able to maintain our existing services. We had a 2020 2022 budget where, there were, very little increases. And again, we're presented with those same challenges, but yet we have growth happening. We have more households, we have more people. So it's definitely challenging for all the service areas to maintain our levels of service as growth happens and we have these financial restraints. So, in terms of bylaw and fire, of course, increased call volumes. And so I'm just going to, for each service category as well, just to give you some idea of some of the items that were cut. They did put forward, a bylaw put forward a request to have some co-op students, some municipal law co-op students, and so, that's an example, and there's a number of them, a request that was not advanced. Because, as we were going through this process, we were looking for opportunities, and it was finding that balance between service delivery and delivering a budget that was respectful of, the tax rate increase. So that was not advanced. As well, we did, and you'll see this in the financial overview, there's a table that identifies the more significant budget reductions or budget asks that we didn't include in the budget. And so in this particular service category, fire put forward that in terms of, in an effort to find some savings, they said, well, we will take our fireboat out of service. So that was one way that they could save some operating dollars. Those reductions, that table that's listed in the financial overview, while staff have removed it from the budget, and recommended it to be removed. It is your budget, and so you can decide whether you want to stick with staff's recommendation on those budget reductions or add those back in. If you do add them back in, it would increase the tax rate. And so we would need to find savings elsewhere to not have it increase as a result of that addition. As well in this category, there's a couple of staff additions that are there for your consideration. So in the financial overview document as well, there's a table that lists some service enhancements. Most of them being staffing positions that we have not included in the budget book, but are there for your consideration. So you can review them, and should you wish to add them into the budget, you can. In the case within safety, there was an MLE officer, a municipal law officer put forward, and a fire administrator position put forward. Staff did not include those in the budget book, but they're there for your consideration. Next slide, please. So the growth category, like as I mentioned, it is primarily dealing with services related to growth. The first one I want to speak to is the building permit and inspection service. The building permit and inspection service is governed or legislated through the Building Code Act. And so any revenues that we do collect for building inspection fees, so like building permit revenues, it has to be used to pay for building code, building inspection expenditures. And so we can't use those revenues to pay for other town related services. It can only be used for building inspection. And so in years where we have a surplus, we transfer it to reserve because we can't use those surplus dollars in other parts of our operating budget. In years where we've got a shortfall, we can pull from the reserve. So it sort of acts as a stabilization reserve, and it smooths out the operating budget impacts year over year. This particular service area, of course, is impacted fairly directly by growth. And as a result of that, we are recommending 2 positions for building inspection, one being a deputy CBO and another being a team coordinator. So we have included those in the budget. Staff's recommending them. Of course, council has the option to remove them. But it's important to note that, and one of the reasons we are recommending them is that they don't impact the tax levy. They are fully funded from building code revenues. The other services in this service category, economic development, engineering, and planning, there were some cuts that we made to economic development to get the cost down. In engineering and planning services, again, I'll say this a number of times, big pressures on staffing resources in a growth-related, in a growing community. And so they're definitely feeling those pressures. So to that point, we are recommending that a capital project manager be hired and an engineering technologist. And so we have included those positions in the budget. We are recommending those, but of course council has the option to take those back out. The reason that we are recommending them is that those positions are primarily funded from development revenues and the capital reserve funds, because they're working on development-related work or capital infrastructure pieces. And so the impact to the tax levy is minimal, and so that's why we've recommended that. Another, we also have included in this area for your consideration the addition of a mobility orbit planner. We haven't included it, but it's there for your consideration. Next, please. So the connection service category, there's a number of services in here. The first one I'll speak to is library. So the library, a service partner of the town, is governed and legislated through the Public Libraries Act. So the board does review their budget and is recommending that budget be presented to council for your consideration and approval. The board will be presenting that to you at our January deliberation meetings as well. In terms of the budget pressures, and in this particular category, we have utilized some reserve funds that were in related to provincial gas tax dollars for Innisfil Transit. During the COVID period, we didn't utilize all the dollars, so we had put those aside. So we are pulling that in an effort to reduce the impact on the tax levy. As well in this area, there was a request for some sports and recreation contracts and students to help with service delivery. We have not advanced those. Reductions that have been identified, some other reductions that we've identified in the budget book and that we have removed, but are certainly there for your consideration to add them back, include materials for town square programming. We didn't advance that. And as well, we've seen some significant increases in printing costs related to the program recreation guide. So printing costs have skyrocketed. So staff is recommending that we move to a fully digital version of the program guide, but that would mean that we don't have, we don't have a printed copy that's being circulated. So we are flagging that for council. We have made that change in the budget, but once again, it's your budget, and should you wish to add that back in, you can certainly do so. In this particular category, there is one position that we are recommending be added, and it has been included in the budget, and that is the position of a culture and events specialist to promote and support events throughout the community. So we have recommended that, included that in the budget, recognizing that the service needs are there and we don't have the staff capacity to deliver those services, and so that's why we're recommending that. Next, please. Sustainability, this particular category, I would say, has the largest financial impacts probably of all the service budgets. The first one I'll speak to is Conservation Authority. Certainly not any big increases coming in from the conservation authorities, but, and just for your knowledge, so there's two conservation authorities that we contribute to, and that is the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. Both those agencies will be presenting their budgets to you in January for your consideration and approval. So the other items in this particular service category, some big financial pressures and impacts happening here, one of them being insurance premiums. For those that are new, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but municipalities have been seeing significant insurance premium increases over the past number of years. And so, for example, for the town, our budget for insurance this year increased by $383,000. So significant increase. So certainly putting a lot of pressure on the town's budget. We've seen some inflationary increases related to utilities. Revenues in this area, haven't rebounded to pre-COVID levels. So, we still have less revenues than we did pre-COVID in some areas. And so, this is another area that is really impacted by growth and is struggling to deliver to maintain the existing services with the staff that they have. And it's for that reason we added some part-time staff into the budget in this area. This is probably the only place in the budget that we did add part-time staff to help maintain facilities and parks and open spaces. And we're recommending that because we feel we need those resources and those budget dollars to maintain existing service levels. Without those, we would see a reduction in service levels. As well, included in here is some cost related to new stormwater regulations. So we've incorporated that. Reductions that we've made in this area and that are included in that table in the financial overview include parking lot painting. We haven't advanced that. We made reductions to flood control and ditching. Our gravel resurfacing program is less than it should be. And there was also some facility monitors that that was requested that we didn't advance. So you can see, there were some fairly significant reductions in this area as well. They're there for your review and consideration should you want to add them back. And as well, then, in terms of additional enhancements, items that we have not included in the budget but are there for your consideration include dedicated town square staff and budget dollars for the maintenance of bicycle lanes and pavement markings. So these items, we haven't added them, but they're there for your consideration. Next slide, please. And this is the final service category, and this is management. And like I said, this is the internal support team. We provide support to the rest of the service areas. One of the biggest impacts here, and it's a favorable impact, is the change in interest rates. So, they've changed significantly, as everybody knows. And so in terms of our investment income, that certainly helped us, and we've been able to increase the budget for that because we're expecting more revenues from our investment income as a result of increased interest rates. Through this particular service category as well, we are pulling money out of our insurance reserve to help smooth the impact of those insurance increases. So we do have an insurance reserve, and so we're pulling some money from that. We have budgeted in here as well some costs related to job reevaluation. And so when we talk about investing in our current staff, there is an initiative happening where we're going through a job reevaluation process for some employee groups. And so potentially, there may be some financial implications as a result of those job reevaluations. We don't know what that would be yet, so we've estimated an amount and incorporated it in the budget. As well in this area, we increased our wage gapping dollars. And so what I mean by wage gapping dollars is we're actually budgeting a negative amount for wages. We're budgeting for savings in wages. And this is something that many municipalities do because, just organically people leave and there's a period of time where you're not paying somebody. The person has left, you're recruiting, and so, we always have these savings related to vacancies. And so one way to keep the tax rate down is to actually budget for those savings. We did increase it. We had a budget in there before, but we've increased that this year. There's some risk in doing that because what if we don't achieve those savings? Or what if, the rest of our budget is so lean we really need those savings to help, cover the impacts elsewhere in the budget. So there's some risk to that. As well, we were seeing increased costs related to fleet and related to IT initiatives. Certainly, as we make improvements, as we automate processes, digitize processes, automation, costs money. And most of the time with that, there's subscriptions that we're paying to the vendors for the different pieces of software. So we're seeing impacts of that. And as well, in this particular area, we do set money aside here for the replacement of fleet. And so we did roll that back a bit from what we originally wanted to increase it by, just in an effort to mitigate the tax rate increase. And so what we do for fleet reserves is we look out 10 years to see, okay, like what are we going to replace over this next 10 years, and how much should we be setting aside? So by us doing this, we're going to have to, when we get to 2025, ramp up those transfers back into the reserve, because we can see that we need the money in the reserve. But, I mean, like Mike said, we were looking at every and all possibilities in terms of how can we mitigate the tax increase here in this budget. In this area as well, there are some staff additions for your consideration, and it's included in that overview document. They haven't been included, and that is the addition of a P&T Learning Diversity and Inclusion Partner and an IT analyst. Oh, and a business performance specialist. So they're there for your consideration. One thing to note is so we have put forward to you service enhancements for your consideration. But I think it's important for you to know as well, that's only a portion of the service enhancements. We received a lot of requests from departments, and so what we've presented to you and included in the book, we've prioritized what those service enhancements or additional requests are, and included some of them in here, knowing that we can't add them all. So just so you know, I mean, there's lots of requests. There was lots of requests from departments for staffing resources, and like I said, with growth and staff being such an important part of our ability to deliver services, that's why we're seeing those requests. Next. So those service enhancements that I talked about, this is the list of them, and it's included in your budget book. Next. So the proposed budget. So what does the proposed operating budget look like? Well, in total, and this is the average over 2 years, 2023 and 2024, we're looking at an annual average of $62 million in expenditures. This does not include the amount we need for police, and it does not include the capital levy. And so you can see from that, 52% of it is wages and benefits. And
For those watching online, we're just pausing for a moment. We're having some technical microphone difficulties.
Audrey?
so like I was saying, $62 million is our annual expenditures, most of it being wages and benefits. You can see we've got the conservation authorities in there and the library for 7%. Materials and supplies, so, that's things like sand, salt, whatever other supplies that we need to deliver services, and so forth. And so how do we pay for this $62 million? Next slide. So when we calculate how much property tax we need to levy, the calculation is, okay, what are our expenditures? And then, of course, we deduct from that the non-tax revenues. And the non-tax revenues are something we do pay a lot of attention to. And we explore opportunities in which we can increase those non-tax revenues in an effort to reduce the burden on the tax rate. The user fees and charges bylaw, I think I've already mentioned this at one point, that was approved in June this year. So that's the user fees and charges bylaw for 2023 and 2024. And the reason that we approved it in June is so that we could incorporate those rates into this budget. But as you can see from the chart, the majority of it does come from property taxation. 59% comes from property taxation. The others remaining amount is from registration fees, user fees, penalties and interest, and external recoveries from developers. Next. So that was, all about operating budget. So I'm going to switch gears here and talk about the capital budget. The proposed capital budget is $121 million for 23 and 22. So that's 2 years. And I guess, as Mike did mention, that we deliver to council a 10-year capital plan. So, but you're only approving 2 years. We do provide you with those outer 8 years. And we, use that internally. We're forecasting out, what our revenues look like, what those costs look like, to determine the affordability of the program, when we might use financing tools such as, long-term debt, and other things like that. So it's really, we're looking forward, we're wanting to understand, where the pressures will be and, start to plan, how will we deal with this. So of this proposed capital budget, one thing that I did want to mention, while you are approving a 2-year budget, so you're approving 2 years, 2023 and 2024, I don't know if you recall, we have a multi-year budget policy. The Municipal Act does require you to re-adopt that second year. So staff will be back later in 2023 with the 2024 budget, and you have to re-adopt that. So that's what will happen with the capital as well. And so you can see here, the majority of our capital needs are roads. One of the things that we did see with the capital program is significant increases related to construction projects. As Mike had it on one of the screens, the construction price index, we're seeing, phenomenal increases related to construction costs. And so we've incorporated that in. But, at the time when we prepared the budget, we didn't know what 24 would look like or those outer years. So, we'll be, adjusting those as we know more real information in terms of what those costs look like and what those inflationary pressures will be for the outer years. So in roads, the majority of those roads costs are related to growth. So it's urbanization of roads, it's the widening of roads, and the same thing with parks. How are we going to pay for that? The majority of the roads, of the $121 million, $60 million will come from DCs. I forget what the number is from ARS, close to $6 million from ARS, which is our Alternative Revenue Source Reserve Fund. That's where our OLG gaming revenues go in. So it goes into that reserve fund, and it helps pay for the non-growth portion of growth projects, so that benefit to existing portion of growth projects. $34.2 million is going to come out of our capital reserve related to these projects. So that's where our 1% capital levy money goes into. We're budgeting to get about $7 million in grants, so those mainly come from OCIF and federal gas tax money. And then we've got a variety of other, some smaller reserve and reserve funds. One thing to note here is, we are estimating out what those forecasted revenues would be. With Bill 23, we forecasted out what our DC revenues are. So there's going to be changes. And so we will be reevaluating this, and we'll be coming back to council with, when we sort of figure out what those financial impacts will be, and we'll have to reevaluate the program, and we'll be coming back to you with any changes that we do need to make. But it's prepared with the best information we had at the time. But certainly, Bill 23 is going to put a lot of pressure on us, and it's, that 1% capital levy is going to be really important, and the money from OLG that gets transferred in ARS, because the town is going to have to find money to pay for these growth projects as a result. All right, and so that's the end of the capital budget. Next, please. I'm just quickly going to go over your budget binders. So Mike said that the budget binders are a lot smaller than they were in other years. Part of that reason is just that we separated it out. So in the budget book, we've kept that more condensed, and then we have a separate document which has all our capital project detail sheets in it. And so in the budget binders, you'll see a financial overview. And that financial overview really, it captures all the impacts that you'll see in the service business plans. It captures them and provides some analysis on the financial impacts of what we're proposing through the operating budget and the capital budget. There's also a section in the budget that speaks to building the budget. So it gives you some insight in terms of some of the inputs that we use to build the budget, the processes, policies that we used in building the budget. Service business plans, like I mentioned, each service has a service business plan, and in those service business plans, it will describe the activities and the services that it performs. There'll be KPIs and metrics in the service business plan. So we're measuring, how we're doing in an effort to say, hey, where are we not doing good? Where do we need to make improvements? There'll be an operating table in each one of the service business plans that'll give you a high-level overview of the change from year to year. Included in there as well is what we call change requests. So for those enhancements or those additions for staff that we said we already included in the budget, in each service business plan, there is a change request form. And in that form, it describes in more detail the justification why we think we need that position and the costs attached to it. So that's there for your review as you consider approval of the budget. As well, in the service business plans is a capital table. The project detail sheets aren't there. So for 23 and 24, the details for each project is in a separate document, but there's a link to it. For each capital project, we basically have like a mini business plan. So and it'll provide a project description, project justification, it'll outline the costs, and it'll outline how we're planning on funding it. So you'll have all those details there. In the appendix, so we have an appendix to the budget, a variety of very helpful resources for you, a summary of the staff complement. There is an appendix in there that provides you a high-level overview of the year-over-year changes in our budget, some comparison data, some summaries of the capital program from 25 to 32, because we don't include those in the business plans, but that's for your information in terms of, what's coming up in those future years, policies, and a glossary. And as I mentioned, so those are the things that are in the budget book. On our website, in separate documents is those capital project detail sheets. We have also posted the we'll be posting the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation, sorry, next slide. We'll be posting the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority budget, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority budget, and the police budget will be posted there for your reference as well. And one last slide from me. Just a summary of the key budget documents, because I know that this budget document, it's really large, it's fairly comprehensive. So, those key pieces in there, those service business plans, that outlines the services that we're delivering, the cost to deliver it, those change requests that I just talked to you about, so those addition of staffing requests, addition of staffing, you'll see a business plan in there basically outlining why we feel that, why we're recommending that change. And in the financial overview, there's a list of some tables that you'll want to refer to. There's the budget reductions and requests that we didn't include in the budget, but you have the option of adding those back in. It's your budget, so you have the option of changing what we're recommending. There's a list of the recommended change requests that we've included in the budget. There's a list of those enhancements that I talked to you about, or change requests for your consideration. We haven't included them in the budget, but they're there for your consideration should you wish to add them. The library as well has some change requests for your consideration. And then there's the tax impact to the average residential home. So those are some key documents for your reference. And I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Audrey. Just to wrap this up, so have you had a sufficient drink from the fire hose yet? Yeah, a lot of information there. Is that better? Okay. All I'm going to say is please don't panic. All the information is going to be at your hands, at your fingertips. There is a lot of, we just want to share very high level, some of the concepts, the change requests, to have a good understanding. And it'll all come together once you have this binder in your hands and get to look at these documents. And I think to previous counselors, I think you would agree that it's a fairly intuitive document to read through and follow through. It's hard when it's not in front of you. So just really want a high level council's role going forward, sort of what our staff recommendation advice is as you peruse through this document. Always keep in mind, as Oliver says, next slide for me. Yeah, just keep in mind the balancing act. Really try to understand, trying to create affordability as well as investment. Affordable tax rate, but making sure we're investing properly for the future, as Oliver said in his starting comments. Make sure you keep that long-term perspective. The role for council is not just your 4-year time horizon. Sometimes it's a very myopic approach to looking at an operating budget or capital budgets and not taking that longer-term perspective, because a lot of these decisions that you make now are generational decisions, and those generational decisions need to be thought through very, very carefully. So it's that balancing act, affordable versus investment, long-term versus short-term, those things that we're asking you as staff to keep in mind, because they are very, very important decisions. So just the next slide, Kim, if you don't mind. Just really quickly, and Audrey sort of interweaved this through her discussion. These are the decision points that you can make as you're reviewing the budget. So for the operating budget, you can take our recommendations, say, oh, they're great, and they're detailed. The financial overview is a 37-page document within the budget. The beginning is we call it the executive summary of the budget. It's all in there, all the tables. It's a concise synopsis of what we're recommending. 37 pages is concise when you're looking at a budget book that's 207 pages. But so please go through that financial review very carefully. And when you want to dig down deeply, you can go to all these appendices. You can follow through the links on there. It's very intuitive following through. In the budget book has been designed as well with flags saying this is a decision point for council. You can do this or not that. So this is what we're asking is look at those, approve, you can approve them. The corollary of that is you cannot approve it. You can recommend changes, add something back that we've taken out. remove something that you think we don't need to do. I mean, this is your opportunity to have your voice. And that is a very similar, next slide too, Kim, as well for the capital budget. There are capital projects in there as well. You can have the option of deferring capital projects if you think there's other priorities. You can advance projects, speed them up, get them sooner. You've heard it on when you were campaigning, it's a priority of your residents. So you have those options. So as staff, we're asking you to, take these deliberate approach, just follow the binder, follow the flags, and keep in mind the long-term versus short-term perspective. Next slide, Kim. Just to wrap up, this is the sort of the timeline that we're looking at over the next 2 months. The budget binder actually will be posted the budget will be posted tonight or tomorrow morning on the website for perusal, the electronic version. There will be a hard copy available for council because sometimes it's much easier to take your notes as you're flipping through with the binder at your bedside table, because that's where you will want it to be every night for the next month and a half, because it is an enlightening document. So please, that'll be available very shortly. As Audrey mentioned, the budget deliberations will be happening in January 25th and 27th. We are trying to schedule a sort of an information drop-in session. So as you go through those binders, please write your questions down, shoot Audrey and I an email, and then we're going to have an open session where we're going to have the service category groups in, and just to drop it, very informal. It's not a formal council meeting. Just come in, ask your questions in a very informal setting, and we'll address those questions. And sometimes it's easier to do them face to face than instead of a long-winded email. And so we'll deliberate for 2 solid days, I suspect, because I think there will be a lot of questions. And because there's a lot in this budget, and hopefully we'll have the finalized changes, and we can incorporate the finalized changes come the February council meeting. So that is sort of our time horizon. We do like to, typically we'll have the budget approved in December. Obviously, election year is a new year. One of the pressing time frames for us is that a lot of the capital projects we need to tender, and the tender market in the municipal world opens up in January, and that's when all the good contractors are available. So we try to get first out there, get our tenders out. So the sooner we're out on the market with the tenders for the capital projects, the better. So we're trying to wrap this up in February. The advantage is that other municipalities are in the same boat as we are. So they have the same pressures as we do. So I think that's it. And sorry, we were about an hour. And any questions?
Thank you to all of you. I just have one question. Is there a new microphone in the budget?
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It is a lot, and just for council's reference, typically our presentations or delegations are not that long, but it's a 2-year budget, and we wanted to give you a good first overview for what this beginning of this process that we're looking at. I just wanted to ask quickly before I throw it open to questions, if we could please go back to the last slide that Mr. Melanishan had the first time around. So it was the bar graph that looked at the tax increases over, I think it was from 2014 on. Because I just wanted to point out one important thing, and if you take us all back to March of 2020, not knowing where we were. No, it was the one you had before, that, not the bar graph, sorry, that graph, yeah. And not knowing where we were going to be, and coming to council and making the decision to go with a 0 increase budget for 2021. So if you look at that bar graph, for us to get to a 0 blended in 2021, we actually had to go to almost a -1% in the town portion of that budget. So we actually had to decrease by almost 1% so we could get to a 0 blended over that year. Was it a wise decision? We can sit here in 22 and look back and wonder whether it was or not. But at the time, it was what council decided to do. And are we making up for it now? Probably. But I just wanted to point that out. Hindsight's 2020. But I'll open it up for questions now. So just so we're clear, we also at this point will we will be looking at approving just the information, just approving the delegation as information, but also item D1, which is coming up in our consent agenda, which again is just receiving for information, but covers the same topic and also has a number of the dates of when everything is available. Questions or comments from members of council? Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe I'm looking at this from a meta perspective, but when I'm doing the math here and you're saying that the average household is getting a $225 tax increase, I'm looking at the houses that are being built now, the $1 million homes, and we're looking at someone getting hit in the face with a $500 tax increase. So if I was someone who was not informed or well educated with the tax process, I'd be blaming it all on the town. A blended tax rate to me doesn't come across as informative in the grand scheme of things for someone who is looking to understand where their pennies are going because they're becoming more and more rare over time. Is there a way we can give residents access to the breakdown of the blended tax rate so they understand that, for example, my math says approximately 42% of it is going to the town, whereas the other portion would be going to the county and the other places. I want to make people aware that we are not sitting here unilaterally saying, well, you know, we're just going to dip into the pockets. We want them to understand that there's layers upon layers here of different tiers of governments and associations here.
Ms. Webb?
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor. I was just trying to scroll to it in the financial overview because we do break out the portion of the bill that, you know, what portion's going to the county versus the town. Because that's the breakdown I think that you're looking for in terms of the percentage. Okay, so yeah, so for the average residential bill, 46.27% goes to the town, and that includes the town only, plus the 1% capital levy. 26.86% goes to the county, 12.88% to the police, and 13.99% to education. So for the town only, including the capital levy, less than 50% of taxes are coming to the town.
Thank you. Follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I took me some time to break that down, but someone sitting on the outside, as I stated before, who is not going to delve deep into it, they're going to have a different reaction than I may. So I'm just wondering, when we put it out, that we can actually make this information accessible to the residents who want to understand where the dollars and cents are going. If we can do that, I personally would be appreciative of it, because I know that a lot of the new councillors here are going to suddenly get calls going, well, where's the $125 per quarter going to come from, right off the top of their heads? And then, you know, when people are in a recession and jobs are scarce or they can't make ends meet, they're going to find a focal point for their frustration, and I just want to be able to rebut in an appropriate manner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If I'm not mistaken, when you get your tax bill, it says exactly to the dollars going to the police, going to the county. Am I correct, Ms. Webb?
Yes, Your Worship. The other item that I just wanted to mention, and it was on the slide here tonight, I believe, there is the impact to the average residential property owner. So it does show you the amount that we're collecting in 2023 for town services versus what we collected in 2022. It doesn't do the math. Like, it has a percentage increase in there, but you know, you could do the math, or we could certainly develop or prepare something that shows the dollar value. So of that 224, how much is going to each one of the services and agencies from between the town, police, county, education, and capital levy.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. And just because this isn't complicated enough, another day we need to talk about property assessment and how it's been frozen since 2020. 2020 was supposed to be a property assessment year, and it hasn't happened, and I don't believe the government's made a decision yet on when that will happen. And when they do, it's going to require much education from us, because a house that is built now, based on 2016, it'll be based on 2016 property assessment values, not the current property assessment values. And I think that that there will be some panic when they open up their reassessment and see that their house value doubled, but that doesn't automatically mean their taxes will double. So, but that's a conversation for another day, but we really need to wrap our heads around assessment values as well, because as Deputy Mayor Fowler was saying, those $1 million houses now are valued on 2016 property values, not on today's property values. Questions, comments, first thoughts, things that you would like to see, things that you wouldn't like to see? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a comment on the fact that we had a 0% budget during the pandemic, and I think we all knew that by doing that, at some point in time, things were going to have to go up, and our new CAO last year recognized that and asked us to reconsider the 1.5 up to about a 2.5. So I think if we hadn't done that last year, that we would have been in a 60.
Olivia. Hi. I take it your Missile Diplomatic experience is off to a strong start? Oh, it sure is. We really have some. Also, to access. $140 always wishing true, but thanks to them.
We had this happen right at the very beginning of the pandemic when somebody Zoom bombed one of our meetings, and I'm wondering if that's what's happening again. All right, so it seems to have been a bit better now. So you want to carry on, Councillor Waters?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was just saying, I think we knew this was going to happen. I think it would have been much worse if we hadn't adopted the extra 1% last year, so it was a more gradual increase. So I'm glad we did do that last year, because I think we would have around 6 or 7% this year. The other thing I wanted to mention is that one thing I've liked in budgets past are the calculators. And so I want to know whether or not the calculators have been increased. Like I remember in previous budget, I think it was must have been the first budget because I've only been here 4 years. Basically, people could put in their increases they wanted, and they would see the budgets adjusted. And so I didn't know whether or not there's any calculators built into either the website or the digital presentation that would allow people to do that. And the other part was, one thing I find frustrating about the book is, okay, so I'm here and I want to go to here to see the appendices, and I'm flipping back and forth. So if the digital copy was allowed to, that you could just drill down, would make life a lot easier. So have you made my life that much easier?
Through your worship to Councillor Waters, yes, your life has been simplified. Finance has actually simplified your life. So yes, and IT. So there are links embedded. Everything's embedded. We do encourage the electronic version and get used to you can make comments within your PDF and store it for yourselves as opposed to little post-it note flags on the hard copy. We are trying to shift digital. We are trying to be sustainable in everything we do in our budgets too, to save some paper. We are, because we have a new council, we are printing the budget binders as well. So for this iteration, we are encouraging it. So yes, the links will be embedded in there. To your first comment, that tax rate calculator where you could sliding scale, we didn't get a huge uptake on that one. There was nothing significant came out of it, and it was actually a very expensive endeavor. So it was one of those things that did get cut. We made the decision not to move forward with that. Yeah, but it was a fun tool. I have to admit, it was a fun tool, just not one that was uptaken very much. So we did kill it.
Thank you very much.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. So while you're out speaking to residents about this, encourage them. We do those 2 full budget days, and we'd be lucky to have 2 people in the audience. So encourage residents, if they're interested in the budget, to come out and get involved, answer their questions. And when you do get those, are you crazy? What do you mean that kind of taxing? Instead of leaving it there, tease it out. What is it that you don't use? What is it you think we could cut? Try to get more information other than just, I want increased services and lower taxes, which, unless you're a magician, is really difficult to do. Mr. Melanishin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I strongly encourage that the financial overview is a fairly concise document, and it is all-encompassing. It's got a lot in there, so I encourage you, if you are out on talking with residents, encourage them to read that financial overview. There is a lot in there. It talks about our decision-making process. It talks about, what we've offered up, what we've eliminated, and it's a really good document. And it's short in the scheme of things, so I really encourage yourselves as well as the residents to read that document. And please, if you have questions as you go through that, don't hesitate. Email Ms. Webb and myself right away, and we will get back to you with your questions as soon as we can.
Thank you. And I have one other little piece of advice, then I'll be quiet. So when you're going through the capital budget and you're thinking, oh, we could do without that, or we could put that off for a year, make sure you check to see if it's paid for out of the tax levy. Not that we couldn't still put it off for a year, but my point is you could cut out 5 or 6 things out of the capital levy and it wouldn't make any difference to the tax levy because they're paid for other sources like development charges and things. So it'll tell you, every capital item will tell you where the funds are from that. So if you're interested in lowering the tax levy, my opinion is to check the ones that say that they're tax levy funded versus funded from development charges or grants. And seeing no other comments or questions, then I'd ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the budget delegation. Thank you, Councillor Constantine and Councillor Ices. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks to staff. I know this is the tip of the iceberg, the introduction to us of probably 8 months of work for you. So thank you for putting that all together for us. All in favor? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is item number 7. This is the opportunity where if later on in the agenda, we're going to be making appointments to different boards and commissions where you will be representing all of council on different task force and committees. And this is your opportunity to bring informal updates. If there's been a meeting with, in the last couple of weeks, you can, a big highlight that you like to bring forward, this is your opportunity to do so. So I'll ask the Deputy Mayor if he's got any updates from County Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had our inauguration yesterday, and all the mayors and deputy mayors met, and we voted in Basil Clark, the mayor of Ramera, as our warden for the county. We also voted in Jennifer Coughlin, the mayor of Springwater. She ran unopposed, very well respected, as the deputy warden. And our own Mayor Dolan is now in charge of the corporate services. She's the chair for that committee for the county. It was actually a very, very nice day, very, very friendly people, and something I'm looking forward to continuing with the next 4 years. On top of that, earlier, Mayor Dolan and I sat down with Bradford with the JIFGAC, the Joint Interim Fire Governance Advisory Committee. It's getting down to some hard numbers now and some points which are not as smooth as we would like them to be. But Bradford has stepped away for one meeting in the beginning of January, and they're going to be coming back with their thoughts and processes on how we can move forward and if they wish to. We're leaving that power in their hands. We've had a very well-developed fire plan, master plan that's actually coming and benefiting us now for the work that's been done in the past. So that's currently what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And so another budget meeting will take place at Simcoe County. There'll be a half-day budget meeting on January the 10th with the new county councillors. And anyone else have any updates from boards or commissions? Seeing none, sorry, Councillor Ice, or Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a reminder to residents that is that the province through Bill 23 has made some significant changes to the conservation authorities in terms of what they do. They're going to be basically, they used to look after environmental issues and flooding and erosion and those types of things. Their environmental component is being eroded away to almost zero, and the province is going to be expecting the municipalities to pick that up. So when I asked about, well, the town doesn't have those expertise, those skill sets, so we are going to have to hire staff to do that. So why would we eliminate the skill set that we currently have through the conservation authorities, which doesn't cost us that much money, now that we're going to have to include that? I will say that Innisfil and Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority is very lucky that we have the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, which will allow Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority to still do some of those environmental components, but many conservation authorities will lose that ability, and so local concerns and local issues may drop off the map because no longer will the conservation authorities be able to do it. So I recommend that residents keep a careful eye on that and get involved in your local environmental organizations to help support and hopefully hold back the changes to the conservation authority, because they're a long, dear and well-staffed and well-resourced organization, which provides a huge benefit to all of us, even though we may not recognize it around sustainability, around the quality of our lake, around the quality of our lands and our wetlands. So I would just encourage people to get out and do that because it's a bill that makes huge change to the Conservation Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot about Bill 23 in our future. I just wanted to say that South Simcoe Police Board met this morning, and the new mayor of Bradford, Mayor Leduc, was sworn in as the new member of the Police Services Board. And also, we recently gathered to thank and support the South Simcoe Police Auxiliary, which are the volunteer civilian members that do a lot to support our police, particularly this time of the year with parades and events and toy drives. So we celebrated them. And then lastly, I'd like to say that on December the 1st, the very first, the AMO group, the executive of AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, meets monthly at Queen's Park, and we haven't had an in-person meeting since March 11th, 2020. So it was December the 1st was our first time back at Queen's Park for a day-long discussion, and that's all I had. Seeing no more, we'll move to item 8, which is our consent list, and this is the piece of the agenda which can sound a bit like a bingo game. But as you see on your agenda and in all the reports that were attached, there's a staff recommendation on every item that's in here. If you're satisfied after reading the report with the recommendation and you have no questions, then we won't pull it. And then at the end, we'll confirm all of the recommendations in one resolution at the end. This is just a consent agenda as a way of going through it quicker instead of reading every single resolution. If you have a question on an item, please feel free to ask it. If you have significant questions on an item, please ask for it to be referred to Committee of the Whole. And then when we get to Committee of the Whole, we'll have fulsome debate on that item. Is everybody ready? Okay, so our first item is adoption of the minutes of the council meeting from November the 9th. Items B, there were none received. Item C1, which was the staff report regarding fees and charges bylaw amendment to add a cloud permit application fee. Councillor Waters.
I just would like to ask a quick question. I don't need it to be referred. My question is, the document seems to be a little bit confusing about, there we are. Thank you, Barry. A bit confusing in terms of that we're not asking for more money from this. We're just taking the lump sum we get now, and we're asking for some of it sooner. But it does talk about increased revenues from doing that. So could you explain what that means? There was a little bit in there about revenues, that we're losing revenues and gaining revenues. How are we doing that when we're not asking for any more money?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Waters. Yeah, the overall fee stays the same. But we're going to take some of that fee now at the time of application, as opposed to when we issue the permit. Because what happens is we receive a volume of work in the applications, and we do the work, and then we say, okay, our work's done, we're ready to issue your permit. And there's a certain percentage of applicants that say, I changed my mind. And so we don't recoup that money to cover those staff expenses. So what we're just saying is, okay, here's your fees. We'd like you to pay a nominal portion at the beginning that covers those expenses of us administering that application. So that's all we're doing. We're not asking for an additional fee. We're just shifting when we collect it. That's what we're asking for.
Thank you very much. That's what I figured, but I just wanted to clarify because it was a bit confusing in the document.
So there will be additional fees that will garner out of that, because now those orphan files for which we did work, we weren't compensated for. So I don't think it'll be a large amount of money, and it'll be an incentive for people to consider seriously that they do want to proceed with their project. Things do change, and we do give refunds if you know, depending what the circumstances are. But so,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Any other questions on item C1? Item C2, statutory or required advisory committees or local boards of council. I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of council for meeting with me and discussing where your interests lie, and for being flexible in some places where we could fill all the committees that we're going to. All of them aren't going to be filled tonight. There'll be, I'm sure, more committees coming forward, as you saw in the report. However, these are the ones that we're going to move forward with tonight. So we have Councillor Saunders being appointed to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, Councillor Richardson and Saunders being appointed to the Innisfil Library Board, and then the Library Board itself went through a process and chose members of the community to be on the Library Board. Seeing no questions, then we'll move forward to item C3. C3 is more committees, recommended advisory committees. So we have myself, the Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Waters on the GIFGAC that you heard the Deputy Mayor speak about just a minute ago. We have Councillor Fowler on the Heritage Advisory Committee. And we have Councillor Fowler, Councillor Constantine, and Councillor Zanella on the Audit Committee. Any questions or concerns with that item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item C4, the fifth line update and speed limit recommendations. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I don't think I need to pull this, just a question about communication of this change. I am very supportive of this change. It is a difficult road to have higher speeds at. And so my question is communication and enforcement. How do we see both of those things happening?
Ms. Cotillo.
Through you, Your Worship. Certainly there are challenges when we change speed limits on roads to ensure that people are aware of those in advance. One thing we do this, all this work will be done as part of our road rehabilitation program in the summer. So that does include public notification in various forms, including notices delivered to homes in the area, information on our Get Involved Innisfil page, various social media releases, and information on the main town website. In addition, the bylaw is written such that it doesn't come into force until signs are installed. So that doesn't come into effect until those signs are all properly placed, and it does become enforceable.
Thank you, Ms. Cattell. I also had a question. I believe when this came in front of us before with all the different options, one of the requests was there were maybe 6 or 7 residents on that road. If we'd have the opportunity to speak to any of the residents to find out what their appetite was.
Through your worship, I don't believe they were specifically spoken with, but there has been various engagement ongoing as part of our road programs. So that's what's happened on that.
Thank you. Any other questions on C4? Thank you. The next item is C5, and that is the 910 Shoreview Drive Class 1 variations. Councillor Waters?
Can I refer that to committee of the whole?
Thank you. Next is item C6, 1220 Shoreline Drive Class 1 variations. Councillor Saunders?
Can we refer that, sorry, can we refer that to discuss later?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item, D1, I think we've covered already, which was the 2023-2024 proposed budget and the path going forward. And then we get into bylaws. So under bylaws, the first bylaw is the town road system for public highways forming part of the 20th Side Road. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
I'd like to pull that, please.
Thank you. Item E2, that would be the unopened portion of Highway 11 adjoining 449 Old Highway 11 and transfer. Seeing none, the next is item E3, which would be to appoint Councillor Kevin Ices as acting mayor for the term of council. I'll just explain to people watching, because I believe there was some confusion around this 4 years ago. This would be if Councillor Fowler and I were both on the same airplane and it crashed, and that Councillor Ices would be next in line to be the acting mayor, or if both Councillor or Deputy Mayor Fowler and I were unavailable at a meeting, it would be Councillor Ices who would be the acting mayor at that meeting. And item E4, and that is the bylaw to appoint Councillor Alex Waters as the alternate member of the Corporation of the County of Simcoe. There was recently a change to the Municipal Act that allowed for alternate members. So again, if I'm unable to attend a county council meeting, if Councillor Fowler's unable to attend, we contact Councillor Waters and he would attend on our behalf. F1, which is the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority Board of Directors appointment, recommending that Councillor Kevin Ices be appointed for this term to the NVCA. And item F2, recommending that Councillor Fred Drodge be appointed to the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority for this term. And I believe that the annual general meeting for both of these organizations is the same day. It's the January 27th. So we might have to divide and conquer, deputy mayors, so that we can support both of our colleagues. Item F3, the South Simcoe Streams Network, and a recommendation is that Linda Zanella be appointed the Town of Innisfil Council Rep to the South Simcoe Streams. Thank you, Councillor Zanella. Seeing no others, we'll go to items G, which are all items of correspondence. We have library board minutes. We have a letter from the Minister Clark congratulating us. We have county council highlights and a proclamation about International Day of Persons with Disabilities. No one wants to pull any of those items. Then we will go to the consent list continued, the recommendation. So this is the recommendation that then approves all of the recommendations that were not pulled. So by passing this recommendation, we're now passing all of the recommendations that were not pulled. So can I ask for a mover and a seconder? Councillor Richardson and Councillor Drodge. All those in favor? That is carried. And it's normally this time in the agenda that if there is an item that somebody's concerned about and they're sitting in the audience, we can let them know if it wasn't pulled that their item was approved and they don't have to sit through the rest of the meeting. All right, so next we do the consent list continued, resolved to committee of the whole. So now this takes us from our council meeting. Oh my goodness, I just realized I forgot to wear my chain of office tonight. My first mistake of this term, hopefully my last. So at this point, we've moved from the more formal council meeting to committee of the whole, where there can be more fulsome debate, questions asked. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder to take us from council into committee of the whole. Councillor Saunders and Deputy Mayor Fowler, all those in favor? That is carried. And we'll go to the first pulled item, which was pulled by Councillor Waters. Councillor Waters, that would be your item, and it's C5.
Thank you. I'm not going to make any changes. I'm just asking questions. And so I'll ask Councillor Richardson just to second the motion. Where's the? Okay, thank you. So I just have a few questions. I keep on looking over there, and planning staff and building staff are over here, so excuse me while I find you. Anyways, when I was looking through the document, as I'm always concerned about these types of buildings being used for living quarters and that kind of stuff, I could not see on the plans of this particular dwelling a second floor, although it looks from the exterior that it has a second floor, but I couldn't tell from the plans whether or not there was second floor and whether or not there was any living space in there or whether or not it's just a hollowed out area where they can raise their boats. So I was a bit concerned of the space that's in there.
So we have joining us virtually tonight our planner, Chris Cannon. Mr. Cannon?
There we go.
To you, Madam Mayor, to Council Waters. It's a matter of the technology that has happened with the boat lifts. This particular landowner is using some significant technology with the boat lifts, and given the status of the boats that he has currently, it just requires the extra ceiling height. But other than that, it meets all other aspects of the bylaw.
So there is no second floor then, because like I said, it looks from the outside that there might be a second floor because there's windows on the one section.
Well, our bylaw does, through you, Madam Mayor, there is no provision for the actual applicant to have a second floor on this particular boathouse.
Thank you. And a follow-up? The second question I have is to do with why this particular boathouse is in water as opposed to from the land. It seems to, like, even though the property is rather large, there seems, it's very rare that you see an in-house boathouse anymore. And so I'm kind of curious, is there a specific need for this one to be in the water as opposed to being attached to the land? Thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
To you, Madam Mayor, the water is quite shallow up in that part of Kempenfelt Bay. So the reason why it's in water is because they can't get a boat lift into the boathouse. So we deal with these specific applications on a case-by-case basis And we think that this one is approvable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Any other questions on item C5? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation as printed on the screen? Any opposed? That's carried. Next is item C6, and that was pulled by Councillor Saunders. Councillor Saunders, if you wanted to speak to it, but if you either wanted to change the recommendation, you can do that, or if you didn't want to change it, if you could get a seconder for the recommendation before speaking on it.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll take a second. Mr. Ices. Sorry, Mr. Fowler. I just wanted to talk about this shore view. They want to increase the permanent dock projection. They want to put it 30 feet out into the lake, and they want to make it permanent. My point is once they start going this big, where it is right now, what's going to happen if they go down towards Guildford, along Big Bay Point? Like, all the docks are out into the water, all these boats, all these people from Friday Harbor on their Sea-Doos that don't use these waters all the time. Like, I think it's a very, we're trying to, like, I think they're going to start making them bigger and bigger, and that these boats, with, like I said, people that don't know these waters are just going to smash into them. I think they should put, like, leave it to a maximum of what they can increase the docks to be, like, and not, like, just have it not permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Mr. Cannon want to speak to that one?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we have set our standards so as to try to protect the good of the lake and the good of the health of the community. And like, this is something that we've set our parameters on. It's not something that I don't think is what ski doers will bump into, so to speak. But we have our parameters, and I'd love to sit down with the counselor and go through the shoreline bylaw with him if he would like to do that.
Yes, I'd like to have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item? Councillor Drodge.
Through you, Your Worship. Just to touch on that, I know there is laws that are out there that are enforced by York Region Police and South Simcoe Police on their waters, and I believe it's 150 or 200 meters you're no longer allowed to ride personal watercrafts and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if maybe we can get some more information on what the laws are to help make a better understanding of where these docks are sitting. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have anybody who can answer that question tonight, but I'm sure we can take that away and get an answer for you. I had a question, Mr. Cannon, and I think it might just have to do with the drawings, which, if you looked at the drawings for 6.5, they were so detailed, and the ones for C.6 are not as detailed. And I wondered how far it was away from the neighboring properties. It shows 250 feet from one neighboring property and only 38 feet from another neighboring property. And I wondered why it wouldn't have been centered more in the middle of the property.
Your Worship, we make sure that they meet the CPPS bylaw. We always encourage the fact that it should be central to the property, but in certain circumstances, due to the shoreline elevation or the depth of the water or things like that, they can't orient things as close as you might want it. So it does meet the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Can I ask, in both these instances, the one that we just passed and this one, Are the neighbors aware that this process is going on, and do they have the ability to comment?
To you, Madam Mayor, yes, there are signs posted on the property, both on the lakeside and on the roadside, and they have an opportunity to comment if they'd like. There is no circulation required based on other things like zoning bylaw amendment, plans of subdivision, or other planning applications, but there is a sign posted, 2 signs actually, posted on the property, so the neighbors are aware of what is going on or what is proposed on the property.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just looking at the plans and realizing that it is a permanent dock that is out there. I'm a little less worried about the summertime, but the wintertime, you're going to have snow drifts and everything else. So are there any requirements for this owner to flag this in the water so that once it's frozen and you get drifts, that snowmobilers will be able to see this and not decapitate themselves or end up hitting it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, there are not any requirements within the CPPS bylaw that would require a landowner to flag a permanent dock or a boathouse that's in water that would cause any harm to somebody who is actually riding a ski-doo.
So as a town, in terms of liability, that we allow this to happen, and because that seems like a significant safety issue in the wintertime. The summertime, I don't have a problem with, but the wintertime seems to be, because you get some of those snowmobilers out there and they're going crazy. And if this is just one dock, if there's a series of docks, you might see it, but one dock by itself, 100 feet out from shore, I'd be quite concerned. So I'm surprised we don't have any safety regulations about these during the wintertime, just for that particular reason. Like floating docks, you can always bring in, they're not there, but during the wintertime, it seems to be a safety hazard that we might want to consider down the road. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll note that concern.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon, and perhaps in one of our learning opportunities as we go forward and do delegations, we could have someone from staff give us an overview of the community planning permit system, what the rules are, and what's allowed and not allowed. Do we see any other questions or comments? Then I will call the vote. It's been duly moved and seconded by Councillor Saunders and Deputy Mayor Fowler. All those in favor? Those opposed? I didn't see hands, sorry. Those in favor? 2, 3, 4. And those opposed? 1 opposed, that carries. Next, we'll go to item E1. Oh, sorry, that was Councillor Fowler, or Deputy Mayor Fowler. It's going to take me a while. You're just going to have to please be patient with me.
Thank you, Your Worship. I need a seconder for this, please. Councillor Waters, thank you. I'm looking at the blueprints here, and I've got a question that may lead to other questions, so I apologize in advance. I'm looking at this, and I'm assuming that this is the intersection at Innisfil Beach Road and 20th Side Road. This is the one we're speaking of. Am I correct in that assumption?
Mr. Parkin?
Thank you, through your worship, to Deputy Mayor. It's actually the intersection of 20th Side Road, and I can't remember the exact area, but it's closer to Mapleview. There's a bend in 20th, closer north of here. It's not by the railroad tracks.
Then I have no other questions. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Just a request, not particularly with this one here, but sometimes I find that being a geographer, I like to have a situation map and a site map that allows me to quickly pinpoint where this is, because there was another item on the list that I could not find. I didn't know where Penetang Machine Road was, and I looked all over the place, couldn't find it. So if in future, if we could have 2 maps that would allow us to, so we wouldn't have these types of questions. That would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I see lots of nodding, and Penetang Road is also known as Old Highway 11, and it's in Barclay, in wonderful Ward 7. All in favor of the recommendation? That is carried. And now we will go to our RISE recommendation to go back into council. So that would be moved by Deputy Mayor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Ices. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And consideration to adopt the recommendations from Committee of the Whole, which I said we'd already done. We hadn't. So we will now. So that would be Councillor Zanello and Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. And next we will go to so this is a section where notices, you can do a notice of motion. So that could be any notice of motion that you wanted to bring forward. There's no discussion on it that night. It could be something like, I would like staff to investigate painting all the fire hydrants purple. And then we would not discuss it that night. It would be 2 weeks later. You'd have the opportunity to ask questions about why you picked the color purple, and then it would be discussed at the next meeting. And I'm oversimplifying it, but we've had no notices that have been given this evening, and we'll move to announcements. Is there any announcements from members of council? Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you, Your Worship. With the holiday season quickly approaching, we have, as Innisfil's population is diversifying and growing, we've adopted some new practices. On Monday, we are having our second menorah lighting, which is going to be done at Town Hall. On Tuesday, Chabad Innisfil is having a Hanukkah celebration at the Lakeshore branch of the Idea Lab and Library. And Thursday, at Friday Harbor, we're having another menorah lighting. So anybody who wants to make some time to come out and just celebrate or learn something new, it would be appreciated. As well, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Richardson's event for Light Up the Night for Christmas, sorry. It's going to be in full swing, so there's a lot of people that have put a lot of effort into their lawns. This is something that really, just take a night out, grab a coffee and go drive around town. It's a beautiful, beautiful sight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Other announcements? Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Worship. I too have enjoyed the community events at this time of year. It was enjoyable to be in moving, walking down Innisfil Beach Road for the Santa Claus Parade. It was a lot warmer than last year when we were stuck on a wagon for 3 hours. Also enjoyed the tree lighting at Stroud. I heard Santa was even there. I saw him. And I wanted to let the town know that there's another event coming that's not as well publicized, and that's the tractor rally. On Monday, the 19th, local farmers are going to drive through Stroud with their farm equipment to celebrate the season, and I plan to be involved in that as well. They're also going to be in Thornton and Angus the 2 days previously, but Stroud is on the map for the farmers to come through on the 19th, so look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ices. Any other questions, announcements from members of council? I will just echo that after 2 Christmases of Zoom family gatherings, it's so wonderful to be back out in the public again. I think last Saturday there were 5 craft sales and 2 tree lightings and A partridge in a pear tree. No, there's so many events. It seems like more than ever, and it's just a joy to be out there with all of you. However, tomorrow night, while we plan to be in person for the Orbit Planning Public Meeting, because of what we hear is coming from Mother Nature, we have done a switch to a virtual public meeting for the Orbit public planning meeting. That's tomorrow night, so please log on to that. And then finally, on a sadder note, I did want to comment that we did lose Bruce Davis. Bruce Davis is the former chief of police for Innisfil, and then prior to that, or he was responsible actually for the amalgamation of South Simcoe, of Bradford Police and Innisfil Police to form South Simcoe Police, and he retired, I believe it was around 2011. Unfortunately, he did pass, and I did attend his visitation and expressed our condolences to his wife, Linda, and his daughter, Brooke. And I'll now turn to, if there's no other comments from the table, I will turn to CAO Jershell.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I just wanted to take a moment to give a very warm welcome to Andrea Lee, who is our new Director of Planning and Growth. She's here with us in the chamber tonight. Andrea is in her second week of employment at the town of Innisfil, so we're getting her as busy as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can. Andrea comes to us from the township of Oro Medonte, where she served as the Deputy CAO and Director of Development Services. And I can speak on behalf of the whole senior leadership team in saying we're very excited to have Andrea joining us. So welcome, Andrea. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to say a very sincere thank you to Leo Deloyd, who has been serving as our Director of Growth for almost 2 years now. Leo is with us until Friday of this week, and we are also taking him right down to the wire, getting him as busy as possible, or keeping him as busy as possible till the very last moment. I want to say Leo has been a tremendous colleague for all of us on the steering group. And, you know, I think it's important to recognize that Leo has really acted and served wherever we have asked him to. You know, Leo's role has changed in his time with the town, including having taken on the significant Orbit file over this past year. And so Leo has been a real trooper. He has brought good humor to our conversations, and I think a real belief in the importance of good planning and what that means for growing communities. So, Leo, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for that, CEO Jershell, and welcome to Andrea, and thank you so much, Leo. I've so enjoyed working with you. You're so easygoing. You roll with the punches, and you always have lots of Leo-isms for us, which will stay with me, I think, for the rest of my life. So thank you very, very much, and I wish you all the best in the future. So, seeing no other announcements, then we will move to the confirming bylaw. This just confirms our proceedings for this evening. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. That would be Councillor Constantine and Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? That is carried. And adjournment. And I'm going to look to Councillor Drodge, because Councillor Nickel always wanted to be the one who adjourned, and that's where he sat. So to Councillor Drodge and Deputy Mayor Fowler, that this meeting be adjourned at 9:14 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you. I think you did a wonderful job this evening, Council. So a great first meeting, and it only gets better from here.